Fallout Equestria the Chrysalis, Chapter 20, Part 3. While the wagon crews pulled the wagons around behind Emerald's store, we headed in with the guards and the old Caravan Master. Inside we found Dusty and Emerald, both with their forelegs crossed on the store counter as they chatted. Emerald looked up on our entrance and smiled.
Wagon wheel, I was starting to wonder when you'd make your way around here again. How have you been?
As she spoke, she stepped out from behind the counter and gave the older stallion a hug.
Oh, not so bad,
he replied with a smile as he hugged back.
My knee's been feeling a lot better lately too. Still ain't gonna be running any marathons, but at least it don't hurt to walk.
Good to hear,
Emerald said, releasing him.
I hope you're staying all night. I can get Pumpkin to whip you up something for every pony.
Sure am,
he said.
Well, good. These fine folk here have the northern suite, but the southern one's still open. You all go ahead and take a load off. I'll see about us getting all some dinner.
Wagon Wheel's reply was cut off by an icy voice.
Oh, how utterly charming, I'm sure.
Amber stepped forward, her eyes slowly tracing around the room. By the time her gaze reached Emerald, the green mare had retreated behind the counter, her smile having vanished. Amber stepped up to the counter, looking down her nose at Emerald.
I require lodging separate from the rest of these individuals.
Emerald eyed her warily.
I can do that, miss. It's Lady Amber,
Amber scornfully replied.
Not that any pony seems to be able to remember that simple detail. Lady Amber?
Emerald echoed, giving a slow nod and a strained smile.
I have plenty of rooms available, 8 caps per night. All the ground floor rooms are open. You can take your pick.
Amber scoffed faintly as she drew out a pouch, casually retrieving several caps.
I suppose it's too much to hope for that the doors lock. They latch from the inside. Then I suppose they will have to do.
Amber tossed the small collection of caps onto the counter.
I will pay you each night. Other than that, I expect to remain completely undisturbed. Do you understand?
Emerald's smile faltered as she nodded.
I understand. Good.
With that, Amber turned and walked away. She paused a moment as she passed Dusty, eyeing him but then continued on, her nose high. Dusty sighed as soon as she disappeared. I see she's as charming as ever. He gave a wary smile Emerald's way. Well, I'll get out of here, Maine. Talk to you later. As he turned to leave, Wagon Wheel stepped forward, his brows furrowed in concern.
Hold up a sec, are you Dusty Trails?
Dusty halted, his ears standing alert. He turned to face Wagon Wheel, and I felt an eerie twinge as I recognized that he just set his hooves the same way that he did when shooting. I am, he replied, his voice even and calm in a way that put me on edge. The other stallion eyed Dusty for a moment before taking a half step back.
Ain't none of my business,
he said, shaking his head.
And I don't plan on making it my business, but I figured Emerald here ought to know what's what.
Emerald looked up from the single bottle cap that she held in her hoof, blinking a couple of times as she caught up with the conversation.
What's that?
Well, Dusty Trails here is wanted in Mereford,
Wagon Wheel replied.
They say that he killed a bunch of ponies. They put out a bounty on him. I ain't got interest in bounties, neither does my crew. Hell, as far as I'm concerned, any pony under Emerald's roof might as well be under Celestia's wing. I just figured that Emerald here deserves to know who the pony is that she's dealing with and what might be following them.
Emerald looked back and forth between them, slowly turning the cap over in her hooves. It was a few seconds before she replied.
Well, I like to think I'm a good judge of character, and Dusty strikes me as a good pony. I wouldn't be surprised to hear that he's killed a good number of ponies, given his line of work. But the real question is, who those ponies were.
She ended up looking right at Dusty. He slowly sighed before speaking. In this case, 20-some mercenaries under the employment of Mereford's mayor, and 3 militia rangers. He was met with various looks of surprise, discomfort, and even fear. Emerald just looked inquisitive. But it ain't who I killed. Dusty continued, staring back at them. It's why. Those ponies, they ambushed me and my friends. They tried to murder all of us on Mayor Big Gun's orders to cover up what he did. And you know what he did? He waited just a moment, looking around at the other ponies before stepping up close to Wagon Wheel. That water caravan that got hit a few weeks back, that was his work. He sold out his own ponies to a gang of raiders. Several ponies murmured. One of the pipe rifle guards said,
Oh, Brahmin shit.
He told the raiders when and where they'd be, Dusty said, glaring at the guard. The mercenaries that he had guarding them, well, they abandoned the caravan right before the raiders showed up. These were ponies that he was supposed to protect, and he sold them out to a bunch of butchers. I saw the wreckage. The raiders slaughtered them. They cooked and ate a stallion in front of his family. They made a mother watch as they tied up and raped her little filly, and he's the one who made it all happen. Dusty was trembling and forced himself to take a step back. The other ponies looked around, uncertain, but when no pony said anything, he continued. That's the kind of shit that he does. I've seen it before. Maybe not as bad as this, but bad all the same. I used to be a ranger. I was on the ground in Stink Pit. I went in, did my job, got Big Gun's trader out. You know, I heard a lot of talk afterwards. Ponies were talking about how Stinkpit had gone raider, how they'd massacred some other travelers, skinned some ponies, even tortured the trader that they'd captured. Stuff like that. When I was there. And when I look back, all I see is a bunch of scared ponies defending their homes from the ponies attacking them. They weren't raiders. Hell, the trader that we were supposed to be rescuing was hosted in their makeshift inn, not a scratch on him. He was hiding under his cozy little bed. And you know, I would have thought it was just all some horrible mistake, some misunderstanding or miscommunication. Except the same damn thing happened again in Hayseed, and more innocent ponies died. And it just keeps on happening. This time we found out what he'd done, and he tried to have us killed for it. The other ponies' looks had grown decidedly uncomfortable. A couple of the ponies in the back were quietly murmuring to each other. So, what's the word on Rust? Dusty asked, which was met with several blinks of surprise before Wagon Wheel spoke up.
What about Rust?
Big Gun didn't have a water caravan slaughtered for giggles, Dusty said. Wild Runner might, but not him. He did it for profit and power. He's already taken 2 towns by force just to get cheaper goods. Now Mereford's water caravans get hit right after leaving Rust. How long until he starts pushing for a change of management? More murmurs sounded across the crowd. The bolt-action guard spoke up first.
I heard rumors in Mereford. A bunch of ponies grumbling about Russ, saying that it was them that hit the caravan.
That's Brahmin shit.
Wagon Wheel said with a grunt.
I know Steel Shot, he wouldn't put up with anything like that, and he sure as Tartars wouldn't go hiring some raiders. Hell, Rust puts out hefty bounties on raiders, no way.
You're right, Dusty said. He wouldn't, but Big Gun would. Wagon Wheel mulled it over for several seconds.
You sure about all this?
Not a doubt, Dusty said. We hit those raiders a day or two after they hit the caravan. They had a message telling them exactly when and where the caravan would be left unguarded. We rescued a couple of ponies that confirmed the guards left them just before the raiders showed up. And then when we went to go look into it, Gun's mercs attacked us, and we went to find out that it was on his orders. Wagon Wheel cursed.
That's what explains some things.
Emerald said quietly.
I've heard of some questionable things around Mereford and the rumors about Stinkpit and Hayseed.
And that's just the stuff that we know about, Dusty said. There's been a lot of caravans getting hit by raiders lately. He looked to Wagon Wheel again. Might be good to get the word out to other caravans if he's associating with raiders and selling out his own ponies. There's no telling what he might be willing to do to other traders. Wagon Wheel slowly nodded.
I think I'll do that, yeah.
Out of curiosity, Dusty asked, how much of a bounty did he put on my head? Wagon Wheel hesitated before saying,
4,000 caps for bringing in proof of your death, and another 500 for each pony with you.
Shit, bounty like that'll bring out every 2-bit bounty hunter and wannabe merc in southern Equestria. Dusty shook his head. Still, if that's the price for doing the right thing, I'll take it. After a moment of consideration, Wagon Wheel spoke again.
I'll share your side of the story too. Won't say any pony will believe it, but I'll put it out there.
Thanks, Dusty said and offered a hoof. They shook. And I'll get out of your mains. Just be careful out there. Seems like all the worst shit is stirring up lately.
Yeah, I'll do that,
Wagon Wheel said, though I could still see a hint of skepticism to his expression as Dusty walked off. Scatter looked back to Starlight.
You two were with him?
When we nodded, he added.
And those raiders that he was talking about, those the same ones that you were talking about? Yep,
Starlight said. The bolt-action guard stepped up again, his smile uneven.
Well, now I really want to hear that story.
We spent most of the evening in the caravan suite, talking with the guards and crew. I even produced Guttrip's notebook showing the message in question. It got passed around to muttered curses and dark looks. If that hadn't been enough to draw their sympathy, the story of Silverline and Quicksilver certainly was. Wagon Wheel was nearly in tears halfway through the part of the story, and shared a supporting hug with his wife, Summerbreeze. Scatter on the other hoof looked almost murderous. Thankfully, the story put everyone on the same side, relieving the tension that had hung in the air. Soon we all moved on to more pleasant stories, and there was still the occasional bout of violence, of course. Fairwind the guard with a bolt action told a story of fighting off a small band of ill-equipped raiders that had tried to ambush the caravan some years back. Listening to a story of 4 malnourished raiders charging a small caravan with machetes, throwing spears, and a single rusty shotgun, only to fail miserably in the face of superior firepower, seemed almost quaint in comparison to my own experiences. Once again, I found myself spending a good while in quiet reflection on how I'd come to such a point as to think of a life-and-death experience, however small, in such terms of insignificance. But there were also more relaxed stories of simple wasteland life. Various funny anecdotes and happy encounters filled most of the tales. There was always some undercurrent of the realities of the wasteland, whether it was looking for food and water or the simple tedium of being a guard on the watch for raiders and bandits. But the stories of regular life and happy times made me smile. Sickle joined the gathering as soon as she learned of the dozen new ponies in town. It was clear enough that she'd been hitting the booze and chems, she smelled of alcohol, her pupils were mismatched in size, and she twitched and shuddered on occasion. That said, she actually managed to be relatively pleasant. Admittedly, relatively for Sickle meant that she didn't threaten to crush any pony's skull or the like, and she didn't pin any pony to the ground and set on them while blatantly trolling for sex. Given his prior interest in Starlight and myself, I wasn't at all surprised when Scatter's initial reaction of suspicion and distaste was replaced with interest in what she offered. It also didn't help that Sickle practically sprawled between the guards, dwarfing all of them, even lying on her side, and started prompting them for stories of a more erotic nature. We eventually split into two groups. Those who remained with Sickle told tales of excess and prior conquests, and then there were those of us who discussed less lecherous topics. It wasn't too long before the tales in the other group came to the point that Sickle led Scatter and the two pipe rifle guards, I never really did get their names, back to her own room. I'd say she practically dragged them, given her own aggressive enthusiasm, but they didn't show any signs of reluctance. Among those who remained, there were a few snickers and the shaking of heads, but no pony seemed to think too much of it. It reminded me of the seedier stories that I had heard about soldiers and sailors away from home and loved ones for days, weeks, even months, then arriving in some town and seeking out whatever quick pleasures they could find in the brief window of opportunity. They returned about half an hour later. Scatter walked in, rubbing a hoof at his snout and occasionally drawing a hoof back to look at it, as if expecting to find blood. One of the other guards was snickering and nudging his shoulder, while the other looked just kind of awkward. Scatter finally lowered his hoof as he passed by us, giving us a disgruntled look.
Your friend's kind of a bitch. Only kind of?
Starlight said with a snicker.
Wow, she must have really liked you.
The rest of the gathering chuckled, and a fair amount of lighthearted ribbing followed, including some teasing at how desperate they must have been. It's probably good that Sickle hadn't accompanied them back, as she likely would have maimed someone on principle. The only one who didn't show up at the gathering was Dusty. Even Emerald showed up a couple of times, bringing some food and exchanging some friendly words with Wagon Wheel, but she seemed distracted and quickly excused herself. Not that I'm surprised Dusty avoided the gathering. After the mention of bounties and the discussion that had followed, his presence would probably be awkward for all involved. It occurred to me that I had a bounty on my head too. I was certainly a first. Admittedly, the bounty was for Whisper Winds, the Earth Pony, not Whisper the Changeling, but I'd put a lot of commitment in my current alias. I could shake the bounty with a simple change of form, but it was an option I'd rather avoid. There was at least some dark humor that if some pony did kill me, they'd be faced with the difficulty of convincing other ponies that the bug creature they'd brought in was the Earth Pony that they were trying to claim the bounty on. It seemed unlikely that they would be able to profit from my death. That wasn't really much of a consolation. Deciding to check up on Dusty and discuss a few things about her newfound criminal status, I excused myself from our little gathering. While Starlight stayed to talk with the traders, I made my way back to our suite. There's such a nice mix of moods and feelings that are popping up that makes things so damn interesting. Because it's hard to figure out what's going to happen next, which makes it all the more better. Now, before I go on and on about saying how much this story is just amazing, let's get on to our very precious donators. Top donators: Peter Coulthard, Jayton Man, Darkside, Gauntlet, and Only One Thing, TacoCat598, Zar630, Strix, Rayden, Narwhals, Blackmoonheart, Drake Lovedragon, Pastel Skies, Austin Roland, CrazyKiller557, Stu Hex, Will, Omicron Lyre, Dospo, Delta Omega, Jack Cadge, Rinsleth9852, Madman Stan, Leslie Perkett, Hansa Norman, Stephen Bingham, LineGuy12, and many more absolutely wonderful people. Thank you all so much for watching this video and live life to the fullest.